Hello, this is State Senator Jeff Stone with my weekly Capital Update. You may have heard by now that California is now the sixth largest economy in the world, behind only the United States, China, Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom. Even though our state's economy's gross domestic product was $2.5 trillion, our local roads and bridges are crumbling. Middle-class families can't afford to buy a home or send their kids to college. The most vulnerable Californians don't have access to the healthcare services they need, and our taxes are among the highest in the nation. With the vast resources of one of the world's greatest and largest economies, why can't we fix our problems? We don't need to look much further than the state budget passed this week in Sacramento, which failed to meet the priorities of hardworking Californians. The budget, which spends a record $123 billion from the general fund in the upcoming fiscal year, is an increase of almost $7 billion from the previous year. Even as the cost of state government continues to skyrocket, Governor Brown is warning of dire days ahead for state revenue. His own administration is predicting an operating deficit of $4 billion in 2019-20, and that was before all the additional spending legislative Democrats tacked on to this year's budget in recent days. It's hard to believe that the lessons of the Great Recession of just a few years ago have already been forgotten here in Sacramento. This budget paves the way for future deficits, pays for new office buildings for state workers in Sacramento, while our roads and bridges across the state continue to crumble. It hikes car registration and other fees on people who already dig deeper in their pockets than most Americans. Thankfully, the governor insisted on putting another $2 billion into the rainy day fund. Sadly, because of the Democrats in the legislature, we're going to spend that fund sooner rather than later. While spending is going up, this budget also fails to make current debt reductions a high enough priority. California's $170 billion unfunded pension liability is bigger than any other state by far. In total, California now has debts and obligations estimated at $330 billion. That's over $8,000 for every man, woman, and child in California. And that's just our state debt and obligations. And this budget does almost nothing to reduce the burden on our children and our grandchildren who will be paying for our spending for many years to come. This budget also doesn't deal with the $59 billion in unfunded road maintenance. Instead, it gives state bureaucrats nearly $1.3 billion to build new office buildings here in Sacramento. Even more frustrating, spending on the governor's bullet train to nowhere will reach $1.7 billion in this budget, a massive increase of almost $930 million over the current year's spending. In the final few days of the budget hearings, there were a number of so-called trailer bills, which are too often negotiated and crafted in backroom deals made between legislative Democrats and the governor that adds millions of dollars to the budget, even though they had little chance to be read by the public and the minority party before they came to a vote. This lack of transparency has become business as usual here in Sacramento, and it's time for it to stop. And that's why I voted for SCA 14 this week, the Legislative Transparency Act that will mandate the public have at least 72 hours to review legislation on the internet before a final vote can be taken. SCA 14 will put a government transparency initiative on the November 2016 ballot and will allow the people of the state of California to decide if they want the same kind of open government in their state capital that is already required by law for city councils, county boards of supervisors, and every other elected government board in the state of California. As always, I want to hear from you. Please visit my website, like me on Facebook, and follow me on Twitter. And once again, thank you very much for the opportunity you've given me to serve you here in the state capitol.